What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. And it is Thursday, October 25th. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. Let me get everything else basically squared away here, and we are good to go. And boy, there is a lot of stuff happening. More of those very obvious phony bombs have shown up at Joe Biden and Robert De Niro. And the corporate media is still acting like this is an outrage and this is terrible. But it's beginning to slip because there are already leaks from within law enforcement that the bombs are a hoax, which we already knew. I mean, there are so many things wrong with that bomb. And they're now saying that the powder that was included with the prop sent to CNN was harmless. It was not ricin, as originally claimed. And remember that ISIS flag that was seen on one of them? It turns out it's not really the flag of ISIS. It's a parody ISIS flag from Larry the Cable Guy. And on the bottom it carries the slogan, "Get her done," and the logo up at the top is actually the silhouette of women intertwined to sort of look like it's Arabic red. It's all a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax. And they're still trying to push on this thing, but they're not really getting any traction. Hardly anybody is buying this thing. These non-functional bombs are being sent to people who aren't even running for office. The postal stamps were not voided. There weren't enough postal stamps for a package of that weight. It turns out the clock stuck to the side of that pipe doesn't even have an alarm function. So it couldn't be used to trigger off a bomb. I mean, it's just wrong from top to bottom. Now, law enforcement is claiming they now have surveillance video of a courier delivering the package to CNN. So that means the stamps also were just props. And it raises the question of, was it a real courier or somebody kind of working undercover? Because couriers normally won't deliver packages with postage on them. But as you can look in the photographs of the packages, there's no postmark. There's no cancellation marks. It's a very crudely done TV prop. And but it's a major operation. It's been happening all across the country, out to Maxine Waters and so forth. So it's nonsense. It's silly, and it's badly done, and I don't think they're getting the traction with it here. Now, of course, the corporate media is still out there pushing the liberal line that Donald Trump and the Trump supporters, their demonization of political opponents has led to these bombings because Trump says bad things about CNN and about Maxine Waters and about Robert De Niro. But then, on the other hand, look at all the bad things that CNN and Maxine Waters and Robert De Niro have said about Donald Trump. So it's kind of a two-way street. And let's be honest, there have been over 500 incidents of liberal violence against conservatives. Not fake violence, actual, real, get in their face, cause injury violence, which the corporate media ignores. But of course, they're making a big deal out of these phony bombs, trying to build sympathy for those poor Democrats. Those poor suffering Democrats, feel sorry for them and vote for them. So it's a propaganda operation, no way. And CNN has even gone so far as to attack Donald Trump for refusing to take responsibility for the pipe bombs at his Wisconsin rally. And, of course, nobody has taken responsibility for the bomb scare. But CNN is out there saying, well, obviously you're ultimately responsible, and you should be out there admitting that you and your supporters are behind all of this. And, of course, Trump said, heck no, this is Kavanaugh all over again. Accusation does not equal guilt. Now, every single recipient of these bomb packages, Soros, Obama, Clinton, Brennan, Wasserman, Schultz, Holder, Biden, De Niro, CNN, has been a target of Trump, and yet none of these bombs exploded. It is obviously a false flag bomb scare. The bombs couldn't explode. There's no alarm function on the clock. Apparently, the NYPD came on out and said that the powder inside the pipe is sulfur, which can burn slowly. It's used in matches, but it doesn't explode. So, yeah, it's just false flag. It is just a false flag to build sympathy for the Democrats. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. So, conservatives overall do not engage in the kind of violence that the Democrats do. Conservatives do not go on out and shoot up Democratic baseball practice, as just one example. And yet the Democrats and the corporate media are out there trying to portray Republicans as crazed, violent nuts you should not allow into the government. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Or if you prefer the psychological term, they're projecting. They're projecting their own failings and weakness onto the opposition here. And let's, again, talk about common sense. Look for what should be there and isn't. Why would Republicans do a bomb scare to mess up the midterms, which by all indications they're probably going to do very well in? And the answer is they wouldn't. They don't have a motive to do this. The Democrats do. Who benefits from this? Not the Republicans. The Democrats do. They can play for sympathy. They can say, see, the Republicans are just as violent as we are. And, of course, it's also distracting from the migrant caravan, which is turning out to be a major loser for the Democrats going to the midterms, because immigration is definitely high up on the list of concerns of the midterm voters. All right, now, article coming out of Natural News. Fake pipe bomb hoax reveals last-ditch desperation of self-victimizing Democrats who are terrified of losing the midterm elections. And that's really what it comes down to. If they fail to retake the House, all of those House investigations will continue. What we have seen over the last 2 years is the deep state stalling and stonewalling all of the investigations so that the Democrats could steal the House in the midterms. The leadership of all the committees would change, and all the investigations would go away, and everybody would go home happy. They got away with the crimes they got away with. That's what this is really all about. So, anyway, apparently down at the Florida governor's debate, there was a woman who was photographed holding a sign that said, "Democrats, fake news, fake bombs." This was outside the Broward College building hosting the Florida gubernatorial debate just yesterday. And the photo was shared on Twitter by a Democratic Party spokesman, Kevin Donahue, saying that, well, I don't know why he put it out there because it makes the Democrats look bad. Now, needless to say, with everybody viewing all of this fake bomb stuff as a joke, social media is filling up with all kinds of parodies and spoofs of people making up their own fake bombs around like cans of Pringles chips or drain cleaner. I saw one that actually had an egg timer as the bomb timer. I mean, that's how silly this whole thing really got. And so anyway, everybody's just, they're not getting traction with this. This is an epic, epic fail. And I have a word to any Democrats who might be out there listening to this show. And I realize there's probably very few Democrats that listen to me, but are you not tired of your own party making fools of you all? Did you not have enough of that in 2016, where during the primaries, the Democratic National Committee basically stole the nomination for Hillary Clinton? And now they're out there playing their same games again, and just hoping that as an obedient little mushroom that you'll just go along and say, oh yeah, the Republicans are bombing people, and we've got to vote for the Democrats. You're being played, people. You're being played. I'm not asking the Democrats to vote Republicans. Just stay home. Don't be made a fool of yet again. Over at the New York Times, and this is where the venom and the vitriol is becoming very obvious, and this is being reported by the Gateway Pundit. But apparently on Tuesday of this week, the New York Times published this Trump assassination fantasy article in which the Secret Service collaborates with a Russian to kill the president. That's not news. It's not even opinion. And that's probably one of the reasons why the New York Times is in such trouble. And don't forget, last year, the Times sponsored this production of Julius Caesar by Shakespeare in the Park, in which Caesar is made to look like Donald Trump. And when he gets assassinated at the end, everybody is just, yay, yay, we got him, we got him. And a lot of corporations that were supporting this production, like Delta Airlines and Bank of America, pulled out of it because of the controversy, and the New York Times stayed in and said, no, this is First Amendment, and we're going to go on supporting this. So anyway, it is a real joke. And Mike Adams over at Natural News is right. This is an act of desperation on the cusp of madness. Now, over at the top of whatreallyhappened.com, I put up a graphic which basically lays out all the problems with these bombs. And by the way, the list is not complete. People are finding more things coming on in, but there's enough there. Please copy off that image and mail it to everybody that you know and post it all over social media, and I'm sure, yes, it's going to get taken down. I'm getting emails from people already saying that when they try and put that up on the big corporate social media, it's getting erased immediately. So, since the Democrats don't want us paying attention to the migrant horde approaching our border, that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Finally, several hundred troops are being sent to beef up security at the southern border of Mexico. And this is from Defense Secretary Mattis. He's expected to sign an order sending at least 800 troops to the border in anticipation of the caravan's arrival. I don't think it's enough. There are 14,000 people in that horde. They should be mobilizing at least 20,000 people. Now, between the 800 military and the 1,200 National Guard, that's only 2,000. And remember, the National Guard themselves are not armed. So, great that they're starting to do it. It's not big enough. It's just not enough. This horde is simply going to go around those 2,000 and get into the United States. And the liberals will proclaim it as a failure of Donald Trump. Now, over at Investment Watch blog, there's a video, and we link to it from whatreallyhappened.com. And the story is originally from Real News, where there is one of these migrants who's on video trying to say that, most of us are good people. Yeah, there are criminals and there are gang members and there are human traffickers, but we're not all criminals. you know, most of us are good. Actually, technically, you are all criminals the instant you set foot across that southern border. But I understand where he's coming from. The point is that in trying to say most of us are really okay people, he's confirming that Donald Trump is right. There are criminals, gang members, human traffickers inside that horde. And we don't need them coming into this country. Now, the Soros organization is now officially denying that they have anything to do with funding for this migrant horde. Yesterday, we ran the story about how some of these migrants were photographed carrying bags with the logo of U.S. aid on there. And I imagine that whoever's doing this, the funding has gone through several different front groups to sort of launder it and make it hard to find out who ultimately is behind this. But over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is out there saying, this is obviously elaborately planned. You know, there's food being provided, there's water being provided, there's tents being provided, buses and trucks. There's nothing spontaneous about this. And he too is concerned about the fact that human traffickers and violent gangbangers are being brought into the United States of America. So the story that is now emerging regarding Guatemala is that originally they did try and stop the Honduras from coming across their border. And they didn't succeed. And it's at that point they just went ahead and they made a deal with Mexico saying, let's just open up a corridor and we'll make them the problem of the United States of America. Now, I'm sure that when the news cameras are out there and when they actually approach the border, the women and children will be out front. But observers of this migrant horde keep reporting that overwhelmingly, these migrants consist of young men of military age. And they're flashing MS-13 gang signs. This is a problem coming into our country. And the Democrats think it's wonderful. And like I said yesterday, I got an idea. Let's let in every migrant who's got a sponsor. Every Democrat who says, yes, I will take in this migrant into my home and I will feed and care for them. So far, not a lot of volunteers on that. Apparently, the Mexicans living along the path of the migrant horde are very upset because whoever organized this horde invasion, they're providing food and water, transportation, and tents. They're not cleaning up afterwards. And apparently, in the wake of this crowd of 14,000 people approaching our border, it's just all kinds of trash all over the streets, and the local Mexicans are very upset about that. Apparently the cities are filled with wasted food, excess clothing, various other things. So that tells us something else about these migrants. They're not really very good about keeping the streets clean. And that's something else that we don't need in our country. Now, the Democrats are trying to divert attention away from this because polls are showing this is a big issue for the American people. And the majority of the American people want these migrants stopped at the border. And it's almost twice as many Americans want them just stopped cold at the border than think it's okay to let them in and let them stay here while they go through the process. But it is going to be an issue for the midterms, and we need to keep it in the public eye. We'll be right back after these commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones now to Dave in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha and howdy. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing fine.
Am I coming through okay?
Well, you're a little fuzzy.
Well, that's what I heard from Mike in the control room. And I've got a 5-star signal here, so I'm not sure what's going on. But I do want to do it this way because my wife really wants to hear this conversation, because what we have to talk to you about, Amy has put me up to. But
Okay.
It's not that Amy has put me up to. It's a historical fact that is not or recorded in traditional American accounts of War II. So we're talking about migrants, right? I'm torn on this because so many of them are poor people oppressed by non-legitimate governments who are usually mafia operations that just beat the poor to death for the profit of a few people who own the government. Kind of like the American system, right?
Yes.
So we tried to talk about this one other time and run out of time. But Amy is a first-generation American, and her father is Ukrainian.
Mm-hmm.
Her father is 98. Mom is 89. They met a German concentration.
Okay, now you went away. Dave, I can't hear you anymore. I still can't hear you, Dave. I think you need to go back to the regular phone, and I apologize to your wife who wanted to listen, but you can always hear it on the rebroadcast.
Hello, Mike? Hello, Mike?
Yeah.
Mike, are you there?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah.
You just went away again. Dave, I'm sorry, we can't do the call like this. You keep dropping out on me. All right. Well, thank you, Dave, for the call, and we're going to have to let you go until we can get these phone issues taken care of. And if you want to call back in on a different line, we'd be happy to talk to you then. Okay. The other big story, which is starting to fade away, of course, is the aftermath of the assassination of Khashoggi. And interestingly enough, there is sort of a case study from Al Jazeera about how the loyal Arab media just echoed the Saudi line all along, denying that Saudi Arabia had anything to do with it. It was just, we didn't know where he went. We're perfectly innocent. And then, of course, when Saudi Arabia's government finally flipped around and said, yeah, he did die inside the consulate in Istanbul, the Arab media turned around and started praising the Saudi Arabia's sense of justice and the decisiveness of King Salman, and commended Saudi Arabia for its transparency. In other words, they're acting just like the American corporate media. Obviously, nothing's going to happen in that case. They've arrested some lower down individuals, but more and more people are pretty much convinced that whatever did happen to Khashoggi, it was ordered by Crown Prince bin Salman. Getting over to Afghanistan, there is a growing problem with what are called insider attacks, which are attacks on American service people by Afghani forces that are supposed to be working with them. We're not talking about the designated enemy, the Taliban. We're talking about the Afghan forces with which America... And sorry about that. My iWatch just started talking to me. So in order to try and solve this problem, the U.S. is trying to downplay the situation to make it sound like it's just not really a big deal, happens all the time. But they're starting to segregate the U.S. forces and the Afghan forces, in some cases to Afghan-only bases and U.S.-only bases to try and minimize the problem. But it is another indication that the people of Afghanistan, including their military, think it's time for the United States to maybe go home. Now, the reality is that the Taliban, slowly but surely, is regaining control of Afghanistan. And they not only have control of much of the territory, they do have the sympathy of the Afghan people. And so it's another situation that could lead to another defeat by the United States. And I'm sure that Putin is laughing his head off because the United States walked into the same bear trap that the Soviet Union did. All right, we're going to take a break for some commercials here. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here, and apparently Dave in Missouri is back. Dave, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, are we any better now?
We're much better now, yes.
Okay, good. And I don't know why it happened the first time, because I had 5 bands. I'm in Springfield, Missouri. I mean, we've got great internet reception. So, except the conversation is deep. And so what I wanted to say is the migrant issue, I'm almost sensitive to, and I wouldn't have been otherwise had I not married a first-generation American, Ukrainian, whose family, whose mother and father experienced World War II from a different angle of what Americans have been educated is the propaganda, or it is the truth, right? The victor tells the truth, right? So Hitler's the ultimate bad guy forever. Correct. I get that. So many governments are owned by mafia or owned by mafias. A few rich men buy all the politicians. It's the same in America, right?
Yes.
So this was the story. And we talked about this briefly one time before, but I think I said it wrong. And so I hope I get a little more latitude to do this family justice. There is a family in Missouri named the Horbick family. The father is Ukrainian-born. He's 98 years old. The mother is Latvian-born. She's 89 years old. They raised 6 children. They own a 1,000-acre farm in central Missouri. And they came here by means of Hitler's mercy and saving them from Stalin. Now,
Yes.
This is where people don't want to hear this part of the World War II reality. So if you didn't die stopping Hitler during the invasion, which, by the way, no Ukrainian, Latvian, Pole, Czech, nobody ever voted for Stalin. I mean, the Soviet Union, it was old school. It was conquer and destroy, and they did. The Russian armies were absolutely ruthless. So if you didn't die trying to stop Hitler, and some would say, if you look at it in a certain way, liberating the Eastern European states from the Soviet occupation, if you didn't stop when Hitler was coming in, Stalin killed you on the way out. Well, what Hitler did, and this is what is not recorded and what Westerners do not know, is saved hundreds of thousands. I don't know the number, but I know it was hundreds of thousands of again, Ukrainians, Czechs, Latvians, Poles, from the Soviet onslaught that was going to murder you for not standing up. Now, they had already murdered the intellectuals and men of the nation, subjugated the women, displaced the population, put Russians in, much like the Israelis do in the Palestinian-occupied territory today. It's age-old. So if you didn't die stopping Hitler as he was coming in to the Soviet Union, Stalin killed you on the way out. Well, Hitler evacuated hundreds of thousands, and I don't know the number, I wish I did.
Okay, you're repeating yourself now. Okay, you're repeating yourself.
Right.
Let me ask you a question.
And
okay.
Ultimately,
Let me ask you
and
a question.
ultimately,
Okay.
yes, sir.
These Ukrainians who came into the United States came in through the legal immigration system, correct?
Well, here's the deal, man. I did not know this until Amy's father and mother told me this firsthand story themselves. They met in a German concentration camp.
You're not answering my question.
I don't. Yes, they did.
Okay,
They absolutely did.
that's the issue with the migrant caravan. I don't have a problem with people immigrating to this country. My father was an immigrant. He came from Shanghai, China to attend the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Okay, so I don't have a
Right.
problem with legal immigrants. The issue is this idea of open borders in which people are flooding
I'm
into our
not into
country
that.
without being vetted.
That's not what I wanted to talk about. I absolutely agree.
Okay.
I absolutely agree. But the thing I wanted to tell you is what is not commonly understood is that Hitler had mercy on the younger generation that was going to be pummeled by the Soviet armies, and those that were left were. Amy's mother was able to bring her mother. If you were under 15, you got to take your caregiver, or your mother, your father, whatever it was, with you. She had kittens in the concentration camp, so to speak. You got to put little neckties on them and this and that. Had a garden. Nobody was forced to make munitions. From this perspective, this is a perspective that I'm telling you that this is a first-hand account. Nobody, but they met, they were married in the concentration camp. They had the opportunity to go to Hitler gave them the opportunity at the end of the war, either go to Australia or America. They chose to come to America, wound up, they come through New Mexico, which is kind of weird. Went to Chicago, went down to Missouri. They raised 6 kids, have a 1,000-acre farm, many grandkids. It's a story of World War II that Americans are not allowed to hear. Yes, I'm sure he did kill Jews in the concentration camp. How many Palestinians have the Jews killed? This whole thing has been orchestrated by the central banking Rothschilds and all their emissaries throughout the world to create this apartheid state. Now, it's no better than anything ever has been, but it's not understood. Yes, I'm sure Hitler was a bad guy, but
I'm not.
Go ahead. I want to hear your
we get lied to so much. I'm not sure at all. I mean, at one point, Hitler wanted to give Madagascar to be the Jewish homeland. And the Zionists said, no, we don't want Madagascar. We want Palestine or nothing. And the people who died in those slave labor camps overwhelmingly died of the typhus epidemic that was brought back to Germany by the retreating German forces retreating from Russia.
So, the thing is about this is that American history is so twisted. We're not, we're treated like mushrooms. And, people really should get out and talk to those, because they're fading fast. But there's a few left who can tell you a first-hand story of, how their family would have been eradicated. And really those left behind were. The remaining members of both sides of the family were totally eradicated by the Soviet armies, and displaced from their homes, and Russians were moved in. It's just, it's something that is not understood because the Jewish imperialist controllers of the central banking system don't want people to understand they were the ultimate criminals. They financed both sides of World War. They financed both sides of the
So did the New York bankers. Brown Brothers Harriman financed Adolf Hitler's rise to power example. Anyway, listen, Dave, you're pulling me off topic, and I really got to stay on topic here. And so thank you for the...
I just wanted to get that out there.
I understand, and you got it out there now. And thank you very much for the phone call. And we're going to switch over to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. At least with this migrant caravan, the alt-right neocon sites, they can't blame, quote, Muslims. Remember I called last week talking about the scare of the Muslims, Sharia law. I've noticed in my life that people and nations have an unfortunate tendency to bully. And, I find the establishment left, they'll never attack the, quote, Zionists. The establishment right will certainly not either. The Zionists, for lack of a better word, they're too strong. And What happens when you hit the immovable rock of neocon Zionism? What do bullies do? They look for the path of least resistance. They go outwards, right? And where do they go? They'll unite, quote, to go after, the weak. Who are the weak? They're the Syrians. They're the, quote, Muslims. They're Iranians. Because they're weak and they have absolutely no power in the U.S. or the other Western countries. So when bullies meet a deadlock, they go outward. And, that's what I'm afraid that, the right and the left, they'll hit each other, they'll hit a rock, and then they'll go outwards. Now, my favorite caller, Mark from North Carolina, made a good point a couple weeks ago. He said a civil war might be better than a world war or a nuclear war.
I'm hearing a lot of people say exactly that.
And I'm afraid Mark may be right. But, again, since people have an unfortunate tendency to bully, they'd rather go outwards, and like Iraq and Syria, and the alt-right neocons, is what I call, the Breitbarts, the Alex Jones. Did you hear Alex Jones? I heard that he said, let's bring 1776 to Iran, right? Rather than clean up your own country.
Yeah.
Again, what would a bully do? He goes outwards. And
well,
he goes,
history has shown that when a country gets into trouble, very often the leaders will try and start wars as a distraction. And I think that's a big part of our current militarism and Trump's bullying, is to keep Americans looking outside our border rather than looking at what's going on inside our country and seeing how bad things have become.
Exactly, and that's why the Alex Jones, let's bring 1776 to Iran. I mean, what, an election of Trump? Everything's cleaned up. We don't have to worry anymore. So let's go to let's bring it to Iran, because what? As a bully, you're afraid to clean up your own cesspool of Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And you go outwards, you see. So that's the fear I have, that the establishment left and the establishment right, in time, maybe this fall, they'll unite, go outwards to Syria and Iran. And that's, the worry I have.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call, Jim. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. The phone lines are open again here. Now, finishing up on this whole Khashoggi situation, apparently there is a little back-channel diplomacy going on regarding exactly how the United States is going to respond to Saudi Arabia's admission that Khashoggi did in fact die inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And apparently the U.S. reaction now hinges on Saudi Arabia abandoning its plan to purchase the Russian S-400 and buy the U.S. THAAD and Patriot system instead. So this is more of that arm twisting to get other countries to buy our products when they really want to buy something else. Getting a little bit of an update now on this fake bomb scare. Apparently investigators are focusing on Florida, at least in part because many of these packages had the address of Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office as the return address. But in the absence of any actual postmarks, nobody really knows for sure. What's really interesting now is authorities are describing the devices as having been built to create fear rather than actually kill. So even the authorities are now admitting these bombs aren't real. It's all a hoax. And nobody's buying it on social media. There's been an unprecedented social media response to this, where it's being denounced. So whoever came up with this idea, if it really was an organized plan by the Democrats, it didn't really work. It's an epic, epic fail. Okay, now getting on into the conflict zones again. Apparently over in Syria, the militants are pushing for the Idlib demilitarization agreement to collapse, quite possibly on orders from Washington, D.C., which is still trying to figure out a way they can justify going back into Syria and re-escalating the situation there. Now, initially, back on the 8th of this month, Turkish state media claimed that all militant groups had withdrawn their heavy weapons and fulfilled their obligations under the deal. But by October 15th, there had been multiple violations of the ceasefire regime, and it became obvious that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and other radical militant groups had kept their heavy weapons and members in the area. So it looks like this deal to try and stop a direct invasion of Idlib has failed. And of course, as you know, the United States has indicated that if Syria attacks anybody, anywhere, the U.S. will intervene. Now, Russia is expressing concern because apparently a U.S. spy plane may have been directly involved in a drone attack on the Russian airbase in Syria's Khmeimim. And according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, it said that the drone attack on the Russian airbase was directed from a U.S. P-8 Poseidon surveillance plane. And apparently, with their electronic devices, they were able to determine who was behind it. That is a very, very risky thing to engage in drone strikes on Russian facilities. And it may have been an effort by the U.S. to goad Russia into doing something where the U.S. could say, ooh, Russia bad, we have to go to war. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I got an interesting email responding to the phone call about the Ukrainians, Lithuanians, and Latvians. And I'm just going to read it verbatim. What David is not telling you is that all those Lithuanians, Latvians, Ukrainians, Croats that Hitler may have tried to protect are the people that fought with his army on the Eastern Front against the Russians mercilessly, hence Stalin's ruthlessness toward them. Well, that definitely changes the complexion there. Okay, the phone lines are loading up, so let's start with Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. You were just covering the update on the mail bombings. And when I read in the paper today, as well as you just mentioning that the return addresses on a lot of those mail bombs came from Debbie Was a Man Schultz, and I had a flashback, and you probably remember as well. What was that she was also linked to surrounding trying to intimidate or something like that, calling the people involved in the DNC lawsuit? They were the plaintiff's lawyers. They called someone from her office. It came up on the caller ID. You remember that? Yep. And it was also using a device to disguise the voice. And so she's a Democratic operative, so she's.
Well, I don't think she's behind these bombs because she wouldn't be dumb enough to put her own return address on the envelope. And the package that was mailed to her office was actually one that the sender address was completely wrong, and so it was returned back to her office based on that return address. So I'm sure she may know who's behind this, but she's not going to put her own return address on the package. I'm sure of that.
Or, well, I mean, somebody potentially already called from her office to engage in a procedural crime. You know, they're not supposed to have contact in court proceedings, and that's what they were trying to do.
Yes.
Yep. So, but anyways, yeah, she probably does know or got an idea. You know, might be who's behind it. But anyway, I just wanted to share that about the flashback to that time that someone from her office, disguising their voice with an electronic device, called. That's all I got, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're coming up on our station identification, so we're going to put these next two callers off until after the station break. Meanwhile, Ukraine is now complaining that Russia has seized the Azov Sea, and that the European Union should hit Russia with yet more sanctions. Now, basically, the Azov Sea is right up next to Crimea, and Ukraine is still out there screaming that Russia stole Crimea. As of right now, Ukrainian vessels have to get the permission of the Russian Navy to enter or leave the sea. Okay, we're going to take a break for station identification. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're going to go right back to the telephones to Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I wanted to bring your attention an article, and then the repercussions, in my opinion, of the article over at Breitbart concerning Bernie Kerik, because Bernie Kerik popped his head up, and you know, he should remain where he should, you know, in oblivion. But anyway, he came out in public and talked about the mail bomb investigation, and he said they'll have a target in sight within 2 or 3 days, which, you know, most people can just gather from typical policing and how well most police are. But the problem is, why is Breitbart trying to resurrect the career of Bernard Kerik, somebody who should really be held not only in contempt, but, you know, but just absolute loathing and disrepute? Because, you know, listen, there's two groups of people who should be squeaky clean. Number one is the clergy, and number two, it's policemen. And as we know, Kerik was found guilty of accepting money from an Israeli defense contractor, a billionaire named Eaton Wertheimer, and he got a $250,000 interest-free loan. And one thing about when they bring up these people, you know, I guess this goes for me. We lived through 9/11, but let's hope we have the memories of the people throughout in high positions during 9/11, what their roles were and how they behaved. You know, and I think it's very unseemly that Kerik, he received that $250,000 interest-free loan from Mr. Wertheimer when he was over there, and he also when he took a 4-day trip to Israel less than 2 weeks before September 11. I mean, he actually met the billionaire 2 weeks before September 11 to discuss counterterrorism. And so, you know, he ended up serving about 4 times in prison because of that unannounced money, just like Paul Manafort. You know?
Yes.
And so I just think why would Breitbart, you know, when somebody has done something so egregious in the past, I don't think like wanting their opinion or giving them the light of the day or bringing them out in public is really a moral or ethical thing. That's all I want to really mention. You know, to try to make them as a valid authority after what they've done. He's a dirty cop.
Well, what did he say about the bombs in this Breitbart article?
Oh, he said that they should have a target within a few days, right?
Yes.
And they have a ton of evidence, right? And the packing, the delivery method, they all seem like they're coming from the same place.
Yeah,
I found
they definitely do that. Now, this Bernie, is he still an active cop? It doesn't sound like it.
No, not at all. No, he's been out of prison since in 2013, I think.
Well, I agree with you. It doesn't really make sense for Breitbart to be holding him up as a spokesman, other than they can count on him to put out what is supposed to be the official story, because we're starting to see the actual authorities, NYPD and other places, starting to come forward and saying the bombs are harmless. They're filled with sulfur. The powder, the white powder, was harmless. These are designed to scare, not actually work. And by the way, have you noticed all the things that we in the independent media pointed to as indicating the bombs wouldn't work, like that little digital clock not having an alarm function, or there not being a battery? Corporate media, I'm sure the people over there had to be smart enough to make those same observations, and yet they never did. They're still trying to treat it like these bombs are real. And so I imagine that we're going to see that controlled media, whether it's corporate or online, and let's be honest, Breitbart is not what it used to be when Andrew was still with it. They're going to be holding up authority figures who can be relied on to tell the preferred, desired story.
Yeah, well, it seems like a lot of the alt-right sites slowly get taken over by the neocon agenda over time.
Yep.
They come out at first claiming they're nationalists and patriots and all the rest. And then slowly, I think they get hooked on the money and the hook maybe with the fame and the glitter of talking to somebody's famous. But yet you have to hold a moral standard. You can't. This guy is a crooked cop who took money from foreigners and didn't tell the IRS about this loan. And lo and behold, the feds, and this is under Bush, got to him in 2007 and did the right thing and sent him to prison where he belonged. You know?
Yes.
And to try to make it sound like he's going to be honest now or he won't turn again or he learned his lesson, he's honest now. No, that's not how it's supposed to work. He's supposed to go into oblivion. You're not really supposed to bring him out on anything. He should stay in his little condo down in Florida and live it up with his taxpayers' money, you know.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. That's a very telling move by Breitbart. Anyway, Paul, thanks an awful lot.
Right, thank you.
We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And back to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, Bernard Carrick, yeah. Police commissioner to Rudy Giuliani. He was also the one who found one of the terrorist passport.
Yes.
Yeah, fell out of his pocket right next to his foot. I mean, that guy, yeah, is a dirty cop, but who's not dirty anymore? I mean, my God, I mean, you know, he's probably going to be a Fox News contributor, just like Ollie North is, right?
Yes.
Because that's who they put, you know, oh my God. Mike, I know the caravan's important, and I know people calling in about how many people Hitler killed or Stalin killed. I want to remind people again, we killed 1.5 million people in Iraq, Libya, Syria. How many people is more? I mean, if it's less than zero, what the Saudis did to Khashoggi, Mike, they didn't chop his fingers off; they pulled his fingers off. So 1 person dead, 1 million persons dead. This is who these people are. Macron, Angela Merkel, our government, Macron, okay with selling the weapons to Saudis. Everybody knows what the Saudis are. But yet, the spice continues to flow, Mike.
Yes.
You know?
Good analogy.
How sad is that?
Good analogy.
It's a sad, it's sad, Mike. 1 person, 1 million people, they don't care. They don't care at all. They don't care about the migrants, the caravan. They'll use them just like, remember, with Kavanaugh, and they'll throw you overboard. They'll throw you into the garbage can. They'll just discard you because it's the flavor of the day, flavor of the week, and they'll just, that's the way these people operate. We should know this by now. Because, Mike, you have people calling in, when are the arrests going to start? When is the RICO Act going to, I keep hearing people saying they should arrest these people. Who's they? The FBI, they're corrupt. They, the CIA, they're corrupt. There isn't, all of our institutions are rotted.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, there is no honesty anymore with any of these people. It's the system.
There's nobody coming to save us. There's nobody coming to save us. But again, my advice is, I know it's hard out there. We got to stay patient because I'm convinced there's a Soviet Union-style collapse coming to this country.
Yeah, Mike, there is nobody coming to save us. That's sad, isn't it? That is so freaking sad. And, Mike, you know what's the most important issue right now? Is this intermediate range missile. People, what's going to happen when the U.S. puts short and medium range weapons in Romania or Poland? How are the Russians going to react? Are they going to put Iskanders, ballistic missiles, into Kaliningrad? You know what I mean? This is the important issue.
Yes.
This is Cuban Missile Crisis, and the rhetoric along with it is not helping.
No.
You know what I mean? Like it's a disaster. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm 48 years old, so I was born in 1970. But I don't think we're going to get away with a second chance of getting away. With a positive outcome we had. I don't see it because we don't have any
either. And again, my concern this time around with the new Cold War is how many of these weapon systems are now computerized. And one software mistake, we could see a nuclear war launched before the humans could intervene to stop it.
But the people we got running our country, Mike, and in the West, they don't know anything about the Cuban. You know what I mean? They don't really know anything about the Cuban Missile Crisis. They come out with these crazy statements, this arrogant, ignorant statements. Like just threatening and threatening and threatening. But they're children. You know what I mean? They got a children mentality. It's not the same. Like, there's no Henry Kissinger's no more, even though he's like not a reputable person. But you know what I mean? There's no statesman no more, and there's no critical thinking skills in any of these people anymore. That's what should scare the crap out of people.
Well, for the most part, they've lived very privileged lives. They've never had an incentive to develop the kind of maturity that comes with having to deal with the adversity of real life. And so, in a very real way, they are still children. They're spoiled children. And I'd like to see them get their comeuppance, but it's not going to happen without a huge price paid by the American people.
And then, Mike, real quick on Peter from Los Angeles, I was wondering if they ever had for the helping out the IDF soldiers and all these money, to garner money for them. Did they ever have like a gala gathering to help the armless and legless veterans of the U.S. wars? Or the homeless people? Did they ever have these big extravagant money gatherings for them?
No,
only the IDF.
They don't. But again, I'm certain that a lot of these people attend these fundraisers for the IDF more in terms of furthering their own career than actual concern for the IDF. Because obviously, if you are out there writing a check for the IDF, you are then going to be looked on favorably for future movie and TV roles by the organizers of these fundraisers.
And what you're saying is nobody's out there writing a check for the legless and homeless veterans.
Not that I'm aware of, but then I haven't been in Hollywood for years now.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, I was just listening to, Dustin. I was listening to both Dustin and the guy before. the guy talking about Bernie Kerik and Breitbart and all that.
Yes.
Nobody should be surprised with Breitbart. Breitbart is not I don't think it's really ever been an alternate media. Maybe when Steve Bannon was running it for a while, they are very neoconish. You talk about Zionists, they're very not only pro-Zionist, they're almost to the point of fanaticism. They have an Israeli bureau, as a matter of fact, and they have some woman, I think her name is Glick or something, always always trying to excuse everything Israel does, and very anti-Syrian and
well, I'll be honest, I don't read Breitbart anymore, so I'm not in touch with what they're doing over there.
No, I'm serious. So I get it on their every once in a while. I'll listen to their radio show on Sirius. I don't go to their site. Every once in a while, I want to see if they're covering anything that of significance, and they're usually not. It's usually garbage. So they're really not. So it doesn't surprise me with a guy like Kerik, who I believe has been in Fox News also. He's a crook, but he's not the only crook. I mean, most of these New York City police departments probably maybe the most crooked and incompetent police department in the United States. So, maybe it's rivaled by the FBI there and in federal, but that's pretty much really doesn't surprise me. As far as what Dustin was saying too about again, potential for war with Russia and all that. I was watching I don't know if you ever see the Duran. Those two guys with Greek names.
Yes.
You watch that?
I've seen it a couple of times. Okay. I'm not a regular viewer.
They're excellent. They really are. I was watching them yesterday talking about, putting missiles closer and closer to Russia. And this guy said, the guy who's really seems to be an expert on this, he's also on Crosstalk a lot. Both of them are on Crosstalk a lot. He said that believes that if they put missiles, for instance, in places like Lithuania or Ukraine or something like that, that's it. It's on. The Russians will attack at that point. He said Poland. He's not sure. Poland or Romania wasn't sure what they would do, but he said if they ever start putting it right on Russia, right by Ukraine or right into Ukraine or I think Lithuania and a couple other Baltics, a lot of the Baltic states, he said it's on. Russians will attack at that point. And I wouldn't blame him, to be honest with you. That's just like Russia or China putting missiles in Mexico and Canada.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like here. And again, as Dustin was correctly pointing out, it was the U.S. placing intermediate-range nuclear missiles in Turkey that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, the difference here is that Russia doesn't really have a satellite in this hemisphere. So anything that they would do to counter this threat would probably involve some of their new Boré-class SSBNs just maintaining patrol off of our coast.
As advanced as they are in space, you don't think they have anything watching us?
I'm sure they do. I'm sure all the countries are watching each other.
Yeah. That's what I would think too. People say because Russia's, it's amazing what kind of advanced weaponry they have, and yet they spend a fraction of what we spend on our so-called defense. But that's again because we're in what is it, about 700-800 bases around the world.
Yeah, that's really where most of the money goes.
Wars.
Yeah.
And wherever else. So that's probably why,
Yep.
So, but anyway, as far as Breitbart is, people need to know Breitbart is not alternate news. They try to say they are. They got a clown by the name of Marlowe, Alex Marlowe, running the show now and I think he runs their site. The guy's a complete idiot, and so is the other guy, Matt Foyle, who they have also. And they're very neoconish. They're not alternate news at all. They have that other neocon, Steph Walker on. What was his name? Sebastian Walker coming on all the time. Very war hawkish. They're just no good. I'll tell you the truth. I don't, I dislike them even more than some of the others because they try to point themselves as alternate or independent news, which they're not.
Yes.
At least be honest about what you are. If you're a bunch of neocon warmongering clowns, then say what you are. Oh, they were the biggest supporters of both too. they were pushing Trump almost from the get-go to put Bolton in there first as Secretary of State, and then when the National Security Advisor came up, they were taking polls along the Breitbart listeners, the Breitbart people who go to the site. They said that's the man they want the most, because the Breitbart listeners and people who go to the site for the most part are no different than the people that go to Fox News or some of the other phony, so-called conservatives, which are not really conservatives. They're so mixed in with neocons. It's not like a Ron Paul or Rand Paul who are real deal. You know what I mean? Not at all. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And as far as Terry, the guy was a crook. And what can you say? Among many crooks.
Well, the Republican Party has basically split into the neocons versus the paleocons, and I consider myself a paleocon. The neocons, though, they are definitely a different creature. They're pro-war, they're pro-Israel. A lot of them came out of the Project for the New American Century, which basically established this policy of the U.S. trying to conquer the rest of the world. Anyway, Mark, we need to let you go. I got to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, getting on back to the conflict zones around the world. Apparently, 19 people have been killed, 10 injured in a Saudi-led air raid in Yemen. And apparently, this was on the western city of Beit al-Faqih, located in the vicinity of the port city of El Hadida. And apparently, the air raid had been held hours after the previous strikes that killed 3 civilians, including a minor child, and injured 6 other people. And a recent UN report has said that Saudi-led coalition airstrikes, which have hit open-air markets, health clinics, schools, funerals, and weddings, according to published reports, have been blamed for most of the more than 16,000 civilians killed or injured in the Yemen conflict over the last 3 years. So, now, a former commander of the U.S. Army in Europe is sounding a warning. Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges was speaking at a Warsaw Security Forum on Wednesday, saying that a U.S. war with China is likely in just 15 years. And he was advising European allies they're going to have to do more to ensure their own defenses against Russian aggression, because America is going to have to focus more on the Pacific, which is our little neighborhood out here. China, meanwhile, is starting to talk tough. They're very upset over yet another sailing of U.S. warships through the Taiwan Straits. And the defense minister is saying that China is ready to do whatever it takes to retain Taiwan, and that they will stop any attempt to split Taiwan from the mainland. And China considers Taiwan to be part of its territory awaiting reunification, even though the two sides have been governed separately since the end of a civil war on the mainland in 1949. So, a lot of tough talk over there. Tensions are high between the U.S. and China. There's the tariff war, of course. There's the fact that the U.S. is selling arms to Taiwan. There is the continuing kerfuffle, if you will, down in those islands in the South China Sea. And it does look like the United States has shifted away from the Mideast and Russia and is now thinking that they're going to show how butch they are going against China. Now, it's very obvious at this point the United States cannot physically invade and conquer the Chinese mainland. It is simply too big. There are too many people. So I'm not sure what form the war would take. Could even be a nuke attack. We don't know. But people are starting to talk about this. Over in the Koreas, they have now officially started to demilitarize the border zone. And of course, Washington D.C. is saying, yeah, you know, this is dangerous. You shouldn't do. You can't trust each other. But Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un are moving forward with what clearly seems to be efforts at reunification. Israeli warplanes have carried out more air attacks in Gaza. They hit several locations in the Gaza Strip earlier today, causing extensive damage to property in the territory. The attacks were supposedly in response to a rocket that was fired from Gaza into Israel, and like so many others, hit a dirt patch. No property damage, no injuries, no deaths here. Israel is justifying its descent into a racist apartheid state, saying that this involves a fight for survival. And Israel's former Chief Justice Aaron Barak literally stated that what happened in Germany, meaning the rise of the Nazis, can happen here in Israel. So he went on to say that actually, to a lot of people, it looks like it already has. But he went on to say that a regime that does not respect the separation of powers or human rights cannot be called democratic. And of course, this brought a very angry Twitter response from Education Minister Naftali Bennett, claiming that what the judge said was a total lie and that it is wrong to compare what he calls Israel's fight for survival in its own land with the Nazi persecution of Jews. Now, remember, yesterday, Bennett was the one who came on out and said that the land belongs to Israel. They will not give a single centimeter of it to the Arabs, and therefore Jerusalem cannot be a shared capital, even though that has been suggested many times by the United Nations. Now, the Great March of Return protests are continuing at the border of the Gaza Strip. There's another one scheduled for tomorrow. And Amnesty International is condemning Israel's reported zero-tolerance policy towards such demonstrations, warning it will likely lead to more bloodshed after more than 6 months of confrontations, during which Israeli forces have killed more than 150 Palestinians and injured thousands more, including the use of those butterfly bullets. And Israel does not seem to understand how bad this makes Israel look to the rest of the world. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about what's going on in Israel and Palestine. And there was an article in Mondo Weiss which I think makes a very, very good point. And that is that Palestinians are as worthy of dignity as children of the Holocaust survivors. Now, a lot of Israelis would not agree with that, and that unfortunately is something that's sort of hardwired into their religion. But Palestinians' legitimate claims continue to be silenced at the expense of sustaining Israel's long-standing myths of being the safe haven for world Jewry and a democracy with the world's most moral army, which we know is a lie from what's happening at the Great March of Return. And they're not a democracy. With that nation-state law, they're clearly an apartheid nation. Okay, over in the West Bank, as you know, there's all these illegal settlements, and they all have governing councils, which apparently are being directly funded by Israel's government. And apparently the illegal settlements received $39 million in government funding for the regional councils, according to a new report from the Knesset. Now, the report was undertaken by the Knesset's Research and Information Center and disclosed the large amount of money the Israeli government gives to its illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank, along with education, welfare, and support grants. So they're just paying for that. Gee, I wonder where they get all that money. Okay, the Army had a little bit of a whoopsie over by Fort Bragg in North Carolina. They were flying the C-17 and testing out a new heavy drop platform on which was loaded a Humvee, and something went wrong, and the heavy drop platform and Humvee ejected early. And the platform went out early and landed in a rural area. No private property was damaged. Nobody was hurt. Little bit of a whoopsie there, and they still don't know exactly what happened, except that it ejected about a minute early. Over in Iceland, as you know, they're getting together for this huge NATO war games, and the amphibious dock landing ship Gunston Hall, which is part of the U.S. 6th Fleet, apparently suffered damage Monday during heavy seas off Iceland. Some sailors had minor injuries, and now they're saying they doubt if the vessel will be able to participate in the NATO maneuvers. Now, this ship is 29 years old. It's a Whidbey Island-class warship. It's returned to port in Reykjavik for damage assessment. But again, generally when you have a ship that's going to sail on the seas, you try and design and build it so it can actually do that. Okay. Donald Trump is still pushing for the creation of his Space Force. He wants it up and running by 2020. And the White House is seeking $13 billion funding to bring all of the military and civilian experts involved under one command in the battlefield beyond Earth. So, again, I think it's a bad idea because there's a lot of stuff up there in orbit. And if you start shooting at it or at each other, you're going to have all this shrapnel flying around. And it's going to hit other satellites, which are going to explode into shrapnel that will go into different orbits, much of it too small to track. And you could literally turn near-Earth space into this debris minefield through which nothing could get. But unfortunately, those who favor war generally don't think about the long-term consequences of what they're doing. It's, victory now, and the future will clean up the mess. Some messes still haven't been cleaned up, even from World War II. Here on Oahu, there are still abandoned munitions that were dumped in the ocean. And if you have a maritime chart, there are areas that are still clearly marked. No dragnet fishing here. So, okay, getting into politics here now. Apparently, over at Real Clear Politics, their co-founder is saying the polls are definitely shifting away from the Democrats. They're not seeing a blue wave, and that in point of fact, the GOP may keep the House, which is, of course, what the Democrats are terrified of, because then they can't cancel all those investigations here. Now, Megyn Kelly has been taken off the air. Apparently, she made a comment about how blackface really might not be all that offensive, but apparently that triggered off all the PC people. She's now off the air and is apparently being shopped to other networks. All right, so let's talk about the economic news here. We all know that Sears is in trouble. They're in bankruptcy. They're closing stores. People like to blame online shopping for it, but the reality is the American consumer's tapped out. We don't have the money to go into Sears and buy stuff. I don't even remember the last time I was in the local Sears. And now people are concerned JCPenney may be next. And apparently analysts are looking at JCPenney's financial statements going back to 2001. They're apparently on the same path that took Sears into bankruptcy. So we might see another one of these iconic, historic American retailers vanish in this wonderful recovering economy. Now, they did have a good day in the stock market. There was a rebound. The Dow closed up about 400. We'll see if it holds on that one. The other day, Donald Trump was out there screaming that he was going to disconnect Iran from SWIFT to make it more difficult for Iran to do business around the world, at which point Iran's reaction was, well, there are now other systems out there. We'll just hook up with them. And so Trump has now said, we're going to allow you to remain connected to SWIFT. Of course, the downside to that is if Iran is doing business through SWIFT, Trump's sanctions can be enforced against it. So Iran might just go ahead and go to these alternative systems all on its own. Because if it doesn't go through SWIFT, there's no way to enforce the U.S. sanctions on any country, not just Iran. That's why these alternative systems are being set up. All righty. Here in the United States of America, we had a phone call about this yesterday, talking about these tent cities all over the country. And give me a second. There are now more than 500,000 homeless Americans. What's really interesting is that 25% of them, 1 out of every 4 homeless Americans, actually has a job. But because housing prices have gone out of control, they can't afford a place to live. So you have people who are sleeping in shelters, in their vehicles, or on the streets who have a job. And it's exploding rapidly on both coasts. Remember, we had this story a while back. There are employees of Google who've got full-time jobs at Google, well-paying jobs, and they're sleeping in their cars at night. How does that fit in with this idea that we have a good economy? Now, California has almost 1/4 of all the nation's homeless. And the current estimated homeless population for the state is 135,000, which is up 14% between 2016 to 2017. Los Angeles County has 55,000 alone. But sure, let's open the borders and let more of these people in. Yeah, we got plenty of places to put them. Okay, let's take a phone call from Dave in Ohio. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm curious about a lot of things that's going on in the economy. When you listen to Fox News at night, obviously things couldn't be better from what I see going on around here in Ohio. That's obviously not the case, although you see some indications here and there. But what I'm concerned about is these drastic fluctuations in the Dow Industrial Average, for example, where in the course of the day, the gains for a year are essentially wiped out for no reason, and then for no reason within the next day or 48 hours, it all seems to recover. And I'm wondering, is this some normal fluctuation, or is this some manipulation that's being done by outsiders to force an issue in their own behalf, because it doesn't seem to make any sense.
Well, one of the reasons that it doesn't seem to make sense is there are a couple of overlapping issues. First of all, there is the plunge protection team, whose job it is to try and keep the markets looking really good. Another factor that certainly was in part responsible for the market downturn is the prime rate being used by the Federal Reserve, which makes it more expensive to get money for the brokers to engage in their market trading. And when you have the market take a major dip like it did yesterday, for a lot of the automated trading systems and even some of the more experienced stock brokers, that's the time to buy. The idea is always to buy low and sell high, and it's not unusual to see a bounce after a particular market downturn. So that's what's going on.
Okay, all right. I mean, it just seems to make it very difficult for the average person, if they had the means to get on board with this, that they'd have the wherewithal to do it. I watched a program the other night that had to deal with the retirement problems in the state of Kentucky for the state employees, and it seems like it's almost impossible for even a state to come up with the expertise to find what would be available to fund these pension programs as well. I mean, it just seems kind of corrupt and overly complex.
It is very complex, and it does make it difficult for ordinary people to get involved, which hasn't stopped brokerages and online trading companies from running ads to try and lure you on in. But you need to remember, first of all, two things. The high-frequency trading systems are operating way beyond human speed. And so trying to outthink them is virtually impossible. The reason the pensions across the country are in such trouble goes all the way back to 2008 and the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud, which should have been an object lesson, but it looks like they're getting ready to play the same thing again. Mortgage-backed securities are back, and people are starting to invest in them. Now, I don't own any stock. I've never been in the stock market, and I don't claim to be an expert in how it operates, but just some common sense advice, knowing how the market is being churned, especially by those high frequency systems. If you really want to invest, then you want to invest long term, which means you buy a stock in a reputable company that has a history of very slowly making money and growing, and you buy that and you sit on it for the long term. Just put it away in your desk drawer and don't even think about it. You know, don't get hooked on watching the stock market day after day after day. It'll just drive you crazy. I still think in these economic times, investing in metals is a good idea, and keeping them under your own control. So that's it. Now, if you were to look at my bank balance, you would realize I'm not somebody who should be handing out economic advice, but this is pretty much common sense stuff.
Right. And I'll wrap it up by saying if we have a Soviet-style meltdown, God help us all. Thanks.
Yeah, well, if we have a nuclear war, God help us all. I mean, neither option is really attractive. And there are bad times ahead. And what we're trying to do is figure out which path to go down that causes the least amount of harm to ordinary American people and our national infrastructure. And like I said, neither one is desirable, but we're going to get stuck with one or the other. All right, Dave, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Getting into the world of political correctness, apparently over in New York City, somebody has started a business called the Rage Cage, where snowflake liberals can come on in, and for prices ranging from $45 to $120, they can come into these rage rooms and smash up dishes and electronics. There's another company that's opened up doing the same thing called the Wrecking Club. And their prices range from $25 for a hit it and quit it 15-minute option to a $245 for an extra madhouse half-hour session for up to 6 participants. I mean, I guess it's better than kicking your dog, but I can already see an insurance liability issue there, especially if there's more than one person in that same room. What happens when something breaks off the electronics or the dish and flies back in the person's face? Anyway, Ecuador has announced they do not plan to intervene with the British government on behalf of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in talks over his situation as an asylee in the South American country's London embassy. This was announced by Ecuador's foreign minister Tuesday of this week. So it looks like Assange is basically going to get kicked out, at which point he's going to be arrested. Now, the sex assault charge was dropped. It turned out to be fabricated, but the U.S. still wants him. They want to prosecute him under espionage laws. They don't really have a case if you think about how WikiLeaks operates, but they want to make an example of him. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, over in Washington, D.C., there is a conservative talk radio show, WMAL, and it has been evacuated The radio station's been evacuated because they received a suspicious package, which the station manager said does not look exactly like the ones that have been sent to these Democratic figures, but was similar enough where he wanted to err on the side of caution. So the police have evacuated the building, and they're going to be taking a look at that. And that really is the downside of this kind of a hoax. Everybody starts worrying about what's going on. Okay. Over in Singapore, they're getting ready to start this experiment next year. And it involves what are called the volocopter driverless flying taxis. Now, these are automated. They're based on drone technology. They have 18 rotors. They can fly at 60 miles per hour with a range of 19 miles. The rotors are designed to be low noise to cut down the noise pollution. And they're going to start test flights over Singapore in the second half of next year with the support of the government. That's really kind of cool, I think. And I wish them success. I hope it's more successful than our light rail system down here. Okay, now, there's this article where over in Great Britain, members of Parliament have found a new cause to fight for and win votes for. They've now declared that online pornography is as harmful as cigarettes and should be treated as a major health crisis with new restrictions on social media. So they're out there saying that public places must be made safe for all women and girls. And they've called for a ban on viewing adult material on mobile phones on buses. Well, this is, again, more censorship. And first of all, if you are watching the online porn, and at my age, that's all way behind me, do it in private. It really is kind of tacky to just be sitting on the bus or the train and looking at that kind of stuff. But again, this is another attempt to backdoor censorship and control of social media and the internet. And I'm sure that the publishers of paper porn, magazines and books, so forth, would certainly like to see online porn be limited because it is definitely cut into their business. Okay. Article coming out of theroot.com talking about the wildly unregulated practice of undercover cops friending people on Facebook. We're going to take a break for station identification. More about this story when we come back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. Hour number 3, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news here, we're talking about this story about undercover cops just prowling social media. And very often they'll pretend to be underage kids to try and snare sexual predators. That particular part of it doesn't seem to have attracted a lot of controversy, although while I'm certainly opposed to child sexual predators, to me it does seem like it's entrapment. But apparently the practice also goes out targeting suspected gang members, protesters, and what are described as people of interest. And I'm sure that Claire and I are probably on that latter list here. So the people who wrote this article, and again, this is from theroot.com, basically called dozens of police departments around the country to ask what their policies were when it came to undercover Facebook police work, and discovered there are very few rules. In fact, most police departments don't have any rules at all. It's just whatever the undercover cops decide they're going to do, they just go ahead and do. And that should be of concern. There should be some oversight, but apparently the police departments aren't even keeping track of how often this is being done. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, over at Apple, their head, Tim Cook, is warning that the technology giants are weaponizing deeply personal information against us all with military efficiency. And he's calling for tougher privacy laws in the U.S. and Europe. He's definitely swimming against the tide there because we have seen in both Europe and the United States, the idea of personal privacy is just being discarded. And a lot of it's simply driven by mass marketing. They want to know everything about us so they can target the ads more efficiently. But it is surveillance. It is surveillance. And certainly here in the United States of America, it flies in the face of the privacy guaranteed to us by the Fourth Amendment. Now, as you know, privacy has always been very important to the Apple products, and it's a major selling point that their security is very, very good. A few years ago, there was a big stink where the police were ordering Apple to unlock one of their phones, and Apple said, we can't. It's not set up that way. But apparently a company came on out which produced a device called the Gray Key hacking device that can open up any iPhone. And law enforcement around the world has been buying it and breaking into locked iPhones. Well, with the latest version of iOS, Gray Key no longer works. And it's not known if this was a deliberate move on Apple's part, or it's just that the operating system changed so much that Gray Key can't function. But apparently Forbes is reporting that Grayshift, which is the company that makes Gray Key, counts at least one ex-Apple security engineer as part of their team. You can't even view the company website without a login given to members of law enforcement. So, and folks, let's just be honest here. You shouldn't keep anything on your portable devices that you don't want to get out there anyway. And sometimes it can be inconvenient. I know a lot of people like to use the Apple Pay and all this other stuff, and they want to have their banking information on there. But it's an invitation to a tragedy. And so, I mean, Claire and I, and it's not that we're Luddites or anything like that. I mean, I spent most of my life in technology. But we recognize the hazards there. And, of course, some years ago, I think it's about maybe 5-6 Christmases ago, we had one of those credit cards that had the contactless information, the little radio chip, and Claire got scanned down here at our shopping mall. And fortunately, the credit card company caught it, realized it was being used fraudulently. And, of course, the credit card companies have now abandoned embedded radio transmitters and gone with these cards that you slide into a slot, and it reads the chip from inside there. But yeah, keep your really personal data at home. And of course, none of this is really about crime and terror, because real criminals and real terrorists know better than to use these commercial products, which are backdoored. Now, over on Google Play, apparently there's been a study done by Oxford University that shows that data sharing by the free apps in Google Play is out of control. And they found that 90% of the free apps are sharing your details with companies. And apparently a lot of this data goes to businesses ultimately owned by Facebook. So it's definitely out there. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Now, interestingly enough, Google is working on a prototype smart city project. And apparently one of their privacy experts has now resigned from the project, saying that it really is a total surveillance environment, that the smart city is all about watching you, that it's not really about making your lives any better or convenient. It's about, you know, always keeping ads in front of you that they think are relevant. Kind of like the world portrayed in Minority Report. One of the things that always bothers me about this targeted advertising is how I'll buy something online and then for weeks afterwards I'll get ads for the exact same product. Do they really think I'm going to buy another one? I already got one. So their algorithms still need a little bit of work. Over in San Francisco, the city government has issued a new free app that allows users to basically report the location of feces in public places. And of course, San Francisco has a large homeless population and a large illegal immigrant refugee population. And this application is called Snapcrap, and it allows users to take photos of errant public human feces and send those photos to city management using the city's 311 information hotline, which also, of course, provides the exact location of the telephone taking the picture. And according to the Daily Wire, Sean Miller, who wrote the app, told NBC's local affiliate he was inspired to launch the poop reporting system after moving to San Francisco and finding himself forced to step over human waste lying in the middle of city sidewalks, something he'd never seen in his home state of Vermont. Okay, once again, the politically correct people are out there trying to fan the anti-white sentiment. And PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, on Friday has renewed its claim that drinking milk is a symbol of white supremacy. To which I reply, what if I'm drinking chocolate milk? What's that a symbol of? Some of this stuff really does get downright silly here. Okay, Amnesty International is jumping on this anti-Disney bandwagon. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of PC celebrities like Kristen Bell and Keira Knightley are coming out condemning Disney's animated movies because the portrayal of women is not consistent with the feminist model. And they're complaining that too many women are requiring the assistance of a male to have, to be saved or to do whatever they're going to do here. So Amnesty International created their own animated fairy tale based on Sleeping Beauty, in which a prince kisses Sleeping Beauty. She's still not waking up, and he slides his hand up her leg. And it's a little creepy. Keira Knightley apparently will not allow her daughter to watch any Disney movies at all. So, okay. We're all concerned about some of the chemicals coming out of Bayer/Monsanto, especially glyphosate. And there's been a new study that has come on out showing that Roundup is found in 26 of 28 United States cereals on the shelf of your supermarket. And it's high levels, well above what is considered a safe exposure level. And the EPA itself released a statement saying the report should not leave consumers concerned. In other words, they're trying to say it's no big deal. Now remember, this was the weed killer that was at the center of that Dwayne Johnson trial, which resulted in a huge fine, which the judge has now rolled back. But, I mean, it's Kellogg's, Quakers, Weetabix, and it's in Great Britain as well as the United States. Here's the problem. Even without the glyphosate, Roundup is toxic. contrary to Monsanto's propaganda, it is not as safe to drink as water. Remember that video of a Monsanto spokesperson saying you could drink it like water, and somebody handed him a glass of Roundup and he said, I'm not an idiot, and he just walked on out there. And apparently what's going on is, in order to save manufacturing costs, these cereal producers are not cleaning the raw produce well enough. So that's pretty tacky. All right. Down in the Congo, and I think we mentioned this yesterday, but I'm going to mention it again. Congo's Ebola outbreak is about to be declared a public health emergency. And this outbreak is the Democratic Republic of Congo's 10th outbreak in 40 years. And they still don't know where it's coming from. There are some scientists who say they think it's artificially created, but they have another outbreak going on. And this one is proving very hard to contain because it happened in an area where there's a lot of violence and people are moving around. And the real danger is that somebody who is infected but not symptomatic, if they get to an airport, it's going to be everywhere. It's kind of like on the end of the remake of Planet of the Apes, where this pilot gets infected with this artificially created illness, and he goes to work to fly his plane, and everybody at the airport picks it up, and they fly to the rest of the world, and everybody, that kind of a scenario. So I hope that they can get ahead of this, because this Ebola strain it's pretty bad, 60 to 70% mortality rate. More and more stories are starting to come on out about this so-called polio-like illness. It's spreading across the U.S. It's now more widespread than previously reported. The New York Daily News is reporting that children in 22 states have been affected by the condition as health authorities continue to assess its spread and effects. Now, the CDC, which is not always known to be truthful, says that so far this year there have been 62 confirmed cases of what they call acute flaccid myelitis. Now, when this first emerged in the United States, it was being diagnosed as polio. And there was actually a PR campaign that went on out and said, no, do not use the name polio. We're calling this acute flaccid myelitis, even though the symptoms are virtually identical. And the question, of course, that we continue to ask is, what vaccinations were all these sick children given? Were they given the polio vaccine? Because they've had problems with that polio vaccine before. Over at the Wanakee Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation in Haskell, New Jersey, they have had a viral outbreak that has led to the death of 6 children. And state health officials have ordered the facility to refuse all new patients. Apparently, they're doing a lockdown. They're doing an outbreak investigation, trying to figure out just what it is and how many people actually have it among the patients and the staff. Now, so far, the investigation has not really found much of anything except some minor hand-washing deficiencies. They're not saying when the children died, only that it occurred this month. So we'll see what comes out of there. Over in Catonsville, Maryland, Westtown Elementary School is canceling a production of Disney's Aladdin Jr. after the local PC people complained that the play negatively portrayed Arabic culture. This is being reported by WBAL-TV. And apparently the Baltimore County Schools Drama Club was planning on performing the show next February. They held auditions for students in September. And this is a kids' play based on the 2014 hit Broadway show. But now it's been canceled because of inaccurate negative stereotyping of Arabic culture. It's a fairy tale. It's just a fairy tale. And I'll share a little something. When people go to a play or a movie, they want to do it to escape the real world. They're not going to the play or the movie to get re-immersed in what they just left outdoors. And if you go back and you look at the Depression of the 1930s, it was Hollywood's golden age. And they made a lot of movies that were pure fluff. Think about Busby Berkeley and all of his productions, because the people wanted to forget about the Depression, they wanted to forget about the looming war, and they wanted to go to the movies and just be entertained and have basically a mental vacation away from all this stuff. And I think today that people are looking for a mental vacation away from all this politically correct nonsense. Now, up in Canada, there's a company, Mountain Equipment Co-op, who has now apologized for using only white models in their catalogs over the last several years. And they were accused of suggesting the outdoors is for white people only. And so they're going to start going with multicultural models if they can find some. Okay. Again, in Canada, and this all goes back to Reverend Kevin Annett, who we had on the show many years ago when he was first starting this campaign about the Canadian genocide at the residential schools. And back then it was being hushed up. He got defrocked. Everyone was trying to say, we got to make it go away. Well, the Canadian government basically yielded to the inevitable, and there is now a museum that is basically presenting the evidence of the Canadian genocide against the Aboriginal children in the residence museums. Now, the schools were established and run jointly by the Vatican and the Crown of England in 1834 and continued until 1996. And nearly half of the 150,000 children in those schools died. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in Western Turkey, there is this mosque, and you're probably already aware that in Islam, all prayers must be done facing toward Mecca, and mosques generally have this little niche in the wall, which indicates the direction to Mecca. But the congregation had been saying for like 4 decades, I'm not sure this is right. And so Imam Isa Kaya decided to investigate and discovered that, yes, in point of fact, due to a faulty floor plan, they had been off by 30 degrees. So, whoopsie, these things do happen here. Okay, we are finally starting to see some action on the Roman Catholic Church and its bad habit of diddling the little kiddies. Federal prosecutors have opened an investigation of child sexual abuse by Roman Catholic priests in Pennsylvania, using subpoenas to demand secret files and testimony from the high-ranking leaders in what victims advocates say is the first such probe launched by the U.S. Justice Department. And this is on the heels of that scathing state grand jury report over the summer that found that 301 predatory priests in Pennsylvania had molested more than 1,000 children over 7 decades, and that church leaders had covered up the offenders. Remember what Nixon used to say, it's not the crime that does you in, it's the cover-up. And this intervention by the federal government opens basically a new front of legal peril for the Catholic Church. Up until now, such things have been handled exclusively by state and local authorities. Well, now the big boys are coming on in. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Daniel in British Columbia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Michael. Yeah, this fake bombing, it's the timing on it's just too convenient, and also the are just a little bit too suspicious. Eric Holder, I mean, who cares about him unless he's running in 2020? We basically forgot about him. Biden, he's going to run for in 2022, so I could see him being a target. But it seems like the real targets are these swing voters. Like they're trying to sway people who were on the fence.
Yeah.
People who might have seen a reason to vote for the Republicans. They're trying to vilify the Republicans, obviously, with this thing. And there's a couple of really interesting things I heard on
Hello?
AP.
We lost you there for a second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, apparently they found this one of the packages at 4 a.m. at the Tribeca restaurant owned by Robert De Niro, which is kind of suspicious to me because, like, who's at a restaurant opening mail at 4 a.m.? Another interesting thing that I heard on the radio this morning was that they searched Biden's residence before they found the package at the Delaware mail sorting facility. So, I mean, I guess he must have been considered a target. Yeah.
No, I think somebody said Biden got a package and they went on over, but it hadn't actually been delivered yet. I think they blew the timing on that one.
Yeah, there's also the confusion about some of the stamps that didn't get marked by the sorting facility machines.
Yeah, there's no postmark.
Apparently I heard that if it's someone in politics, they usually get the Secret Service to look at those ones. So apparently they're sorted separately. But the funny thing was that Robert De Niro, I immediately thought of Wag the Dog, and
yes.
I just thought, these are the same people I think who are behind Seth Rich. There's some deep state operatives, and I'm pretty sure usually the FBI will put a picture of the actual devices. First of all, usually they blow them up. And if not, they'll usually put pictures of them on their own website just so they can get the public to help and see if there's any thing that anyone recognizes. They did put a picture of one of the envelopes. But I think they're going to wait till after the midterms to tell us that whether these were real or not. And I don't think they're ever going to find who did this. It could be just an Antifa or whoever. But it just points to being a false flag.
I definitely think this was set up by the Democrats themselves. They're in a panic. The polls are turning against them. And looking at how crude these phony bombs were, this was definitely a rush job. And again, the packages don't have postmarks, so they don't know where they originated. And that in and of itself is also suspicious. Do you have more to share with us, Daniel?
No, that's pretty much it. I'll let you get on with your news. Thank you.
We'll let you go here. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Donald Trump has apparently tweeted out a message directly to the migrant horde, basically saying, you're not going to be allowed into the country. You got to go back home and apply legally like millions of others have done. Go home and apply for citizenship or asylum, which is the way it's supposed to work. I know they've got those 800 troops going down to the border. I know there are 1,200 National Guard there, but the National Guard, at least as of right now, are not armed. And the order that deployed them, signed by SecDef Mattis, forbids them from engaging in police work or interacting with the migrants. Now, hopefully that's going to change. But if I were Trump, I'd have a lot more people down there because this horde, they've been bussed and trucked a very long way. They're not going to want to just turn around. They're going to try and rush the fence and crush on through on the idea that the Army and the National Guard and the Border Patrol can't get them all and won't get them all. And any that get through are going to be exploited by the Democrats as Trump's failure. NBC News is now running an article in which they're admitting that these bombs in these packages could not explode. And they're hemming and hawing about it, saying that they can't tell if they were intentionally made to not explode or they were just badly constructed. Well, of course, they were intentionally made not to explode. The digital clock doesn't even have an alarm setting. There's no battery for the blasting cap. This stuff is leaking out from all kinds of officials looking at this. I can imagine these officials are doing the palm to forehead moment saying, what the heck is going on here? Now, relative to the Tribeca restaurant, apparently the woman who found the package at 4:30 in the morning, apparently she's an early employee who starts basically the opening up process to catch the breakfast trade. And that's why she was there. But we're starting to hear it from a lot of different sources that, yeah, the bombs were fake. And, of course, we in the independent media, we had it first. How obvious it was. Over in Atlanta, Georgia, the city has agreed to pay former fire chief Kelvin Cochran $1.2 million to settle a lawsuit brought against city leaders who fired Cochran in 2015 for expressing his Christian beliefs on homosexuality and gay marriage. And Kevin Theriot of the Alliance Defending Freedom, which represented Cochran in the lawsuit, said the government can't force its employees to get its permission before they engage in free speech. That's absolutely true. It also can't fire them for exercising that First Amendment freedom, causing them to lose both their freedom and their livelihoods. And we have unfortunately seen this growing trend of corporations firing employees for activities the employees engage in their private time. And expressing his religious belief, even if you don't agree with it, it is covered by the First Amendment. Okay, we have a caller on the line here, Larry in Austin. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Good show today, Mike.
Aloha.
Hey, I have two. Thank you. I have two things. One has to do with the caravan, and one has to do with the pipe bomb fraud.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you, seeing all it seems like they're spinning the story now that the caravan is breaking up. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually had not heard that. I had not heard that. But I remember the last time they had one of these caravans, apparently people's enthusiasm did wane and they started to kind of break away. But absent a drone video to see what's going on, I don't know. What the caravan may be doing is trying to split into 2 or 3 different paths so that wherever the Army and the National Guard are protecting the border, the others can just get through someplace else. So that would be an area of concern.
Yeah, I see it kind of as a head fake of some kind, because it's coming from the mainstream media, and we had that thing, all that come up, and then all of a sudden we've got the pipe bombs, and nobody's thinking about the dropping off
for them. And so they don't want Americans thinking about immigration any longer, because Americans very much want our borders to be secured, and they're going to vote that way.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. The other thing is about the Kibono part of the pipe bomb false flag. In my opinion, it did take away the attention from the caravan, number one, and it's usually multi-pronged, issue. They're doing two things at once, at least, usually with everything they do. But it did take away the attention from that. And then I remember Lindsey Graham saying something to the effect of, every time the Clintons get close to being caught at something, they accuse the other people of exactly what they're doing. And the Democrats have another losing issue has been the whole mob thing, the whole violence thing. And so all of a sudden they use this very conveniently, the people who have been the worst at it, and they're not real bombs. Okay, so, and all of a sudden they are the victims.
Yeah.
And the other people are the ones that are doing the violence, and that is right out of that Clinton cabal playbook.
Yes, it absolutely is. I would not at all be surprised to find out that Hillary was definitely part of the planning for this. And
Hillary and her multi-pronged hordes that she's connected to, the people who stand to fall if anything ever did come out, there's so many people involved, as you said before.
Well, they've succeeded in stalling all these House investigations for nearly 2 years, gambling that the Democrats will get the House of Representatives and be able to stop all the investigations. But if the GOP retains control of the House, we're going to start seeing panic in liberal land.
Well, good. I don't know how much more panic I can stand seeing from them, but good. Get out there and vote, guys. I know it's hold your nose, for the lesser of two evils or whatever, but it's the same as it was before. And I'd love just to pull out and not deal with it anymore. But I don't really trust the voting system anyway. It's like I'm just going against my own.
That's a big problem. It's a big problem. But what we learned in 2016 is that if enough people get out there and vote, we can overcome the crooked election system and even the illegal immigrant voters, because the Clinton campaign had both on her side in 2016 and she still managed to lose.
Yeah. Well, let's hope enough of us get out there and heed that call and stop this thing from turning backwards again.
Yeah, it is. It's essential that conservatives get out there and vote. As for you Democrats, aren't you feeling insulted that the Democratic leadership thinks you're dumb enough to fall for these phony bombs? Just stay home, watch some TV. All right, Larry, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Thanks.
And getting on back to the news here. A little bit of news from the world of science. NASA has their own satellite on the way to an asteroid. As you know, there was a recent encounter that included two of these little pogo stick landers. This one is called OSIRIS REx, and it's starting to scan for collision hazards on its way toward asteroid Bennu. And this is an $800 million spacecraft, which obviously they don't want to bang into anything. And there is an issue. Asteroids do have a gravity field, and they can have other objects traveling alongside them. So they're starting to basically scan the area. It's still 620,000 miles away from the asteroid, but they're looking for cosmic debris. They may have to skirt around. Now, NASA has also launched two briefcase-sized CubeSats, and they were basically nicknamed Eve and Wally after the 2008 Pixar film, and they were launched together with NASA's InSight Mars lander in early May. And the goal of these Mars CubeSats is to demonstrate that deep space missions can be done with very inexpensively constructed spacecraft, which is a good idea. CubeSats are becoming very popular, and they're not always cubes, but it's a generic term for bargain basement, very low-cost spacecraft that are easy to build, easy to launch. And so far, they're having a pretty good success rate. All right, we've been talking about contaminants in food, and there was a study that was done about the so-called microplastics, which we know are in seawater. They're pretty much everywhere. And now studies are showing that microplastics have been detected in human stool samples for the first time. The samples were taken from Finland, Italy, Japan, the Netherlands, Poland, Russia, Great Britain, and Austria. The study was done by the Medical University of Vienna and the Environment Agency Austria. And they basically found 20 microplastic particles per 10 grams of stool. Now, where is it coming from? Well, poorly maintained food packaging machines are one place, but there's another thing you need to look out for. If you do a lot of your own cooking and you get these spice, bottles of spice from the market, be careful about those ones with the built-in grinder, because those are made out of plastic. And as you use them to grind the spices, they wear down. And that is probably a major source of these microplastics. And it's still not really understood what long-term exposure to these plastics can do. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Migration. I was listening to your show last night, and the gentleman called in, and he wasn't really clear, but he mentioned Barbara Lerner Specter, and I discovered her through Adam Green of No More News, and there is a Zionist plot that is well documented by No More News, and he has posted several really in-depth videos, and he's supporting his claims with articles from Habatz and other Jewish publications, and they are openly promoting and funding migration on their end in Europe, and they're trying to muddy our bloodlines and so on and so forth. But her name is Barbara Lerner Specter. She's an American. She's opened a school in Israel, and she's one of the main advocates for this migration. The other thing I wanted to mention was the CIA produced a song under Obama, and it was called La Bestia, and it's the beast, and it's about the train of death from Central America into the United States. So there's a CIA connection right there, funding a song. It was a hit song, by the way, in Central America, and supposedly they produced it under the guise of dissuading people from coming, but it had the reverse effect, which I believe was intentional, because it glamorized the journey, and it was a hit song. So there's two things that I would like people to look at, particularly Adam Green's work. If you could interview him, Mike, he's such a articulate, well-spoken guy. He does a lot of research on this Zionist plot that he'd be a great guest for your show, and maybe a reoccurring guest, because his work is really top-notch.
Well, I'll definitely look into it.
Yeah, definitely. More guests would be great. More guests, and there you go. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And yes, I do need to start thinking about getting more guests, because I wouldn't end up these radio shows so exhausted, because it is 3 hours, and I'm an old guy. What can I tell you here? Okay. Apparently, the Japanese government is going ahead with their plan to release 1 million tons of radioactive water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant into the Pacific Ocean, despite the fact that it contains radioactive material well above legally permitted levels. Now, I'm sure from the point of view of the government of Japan and TEPCO, their idea is, well, eventually the currents will dilute it and it'll be okay. That's not entirely true. Most of these materials are just going to sinter out of the water down to the bottom, where they'll be eaten by fish, who will be just as contaminated on the American side of the Pacific Ocean as they are on the Japanese side. And there have already been cases of fish that are taken off the coast of South America that are found to be contaminated with this radiation. The problem is they don't have any place else to put it. and apparently the water is contaminated with iodine, ruthenium, rhodium, antimony, tellurium, cobalt, strontium, and of course plutonium. So that's going to be a real mess, and of course that's bad news for those of us who actually live out here in the Pacific Ocean. And they're just saying, we've run out of space to store the contaminated water, so we're just going to throw it into the ocean. And I don't know, wouldn't there be some way to like run a still to boil off the water and leave the sludge, radioactive sludge behind? That would take less room to store. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. We've got one more call we're going to take during the last segment of our program today. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today. A couple of quick news items, then we're going to take the last phone call of the day. Hurricane Willa down in Mexico has now dissipated. It made landfall as a Cat 5 storm. They're cleaning up down there. Apparently, towns are completely cut off because of damage to the roads. Meanwhile, Typhoon Yudu is still going strong. It went over the Marianas Islands, and now it's aimed toward Japan. So let's get this phone call. Mark in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call. I see some memes today about SCOTUS and making a voting rights act and modifying it to prevent polling stations from staying open. And I looked up on DuckDuckGo, and I'm getting a lot of left stuff saying Kansas City closing polling stations. And the other issue was trying to understand immigration versus settlers when they first came to the States, because every Thanksgiving I get into this argument on social media about immigrants built this country. But I came back and said, well, wait a second. Settlers were here for generations. So those people that signed, the country was kind of built. And then everything that came after it is kind of a different issue. I was wondering, you think that is a valid argument?
Well, I mean, if you think about it technically, everybody who ever came to the United States of America, even back in the 1600s, were technically immigrants. The term settler was used when they were going out west to lands that were considered ungoverned and unincorporated, without, of course, listening to the Native Americans who thought otherwise. But the issue is, it gets back to this idea that if they want to be immigrants, there's a legal way to do it. And every year, 1.1 million legal immigrants enter our population. They have to go through a process of vetting and make sure that they're not criminals and make sure that they're not carrying contagious diseases, just like people did going through Ellis Island. This idea of just a totally open border that anybody can step over, that's never existed before in history. That's something that the globalists and New World Order people just made up. And they're out there saying there shouldn't be borders, there shouldn't be nations, it should be one planet, one private central bank. But every nation has an inherent right to control their borders, to control who comes in, and make sure that the people who are coming in will be a benefit to our society. And as we're already finding out from this migrant horde that is approaching our southern border, there are a lot of people in there who will not be a benefit to our society, such as MS-13 gang members, human traffickers, and I would imagine there's probably a large amount of illegal drugs that are being smuggled in by some of these people as well. So, okay. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go, Mark. There's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please make a point of taking that image I made at the top of my main page, just proving these bombs are all fake. Send it to everybody that you know. Post it all across social media. We have to pull the rug out from under this thing. And it does look like it's losing traction. So please donate to RBN, donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow with the Lady Claire, and Aloha America.